Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Meaningful Speech July 2022 Lunch and Learn. Our guest today is Tiffany. She writes as Nigh Functioning Autism, and many of you probably know her on Instagram. I'm going to read her quick bio and then we are going to get started. So, Tiffany is 41 years old. She received two autism diagnoses in adulthood. The first was at age 19 as a freshman, and she was failing out of college and going through intense burnout and depression. Back then, it was called Asperger's, however. She was diagnosed with autism adjacent things as a child, which was ADHD and auditory processing disorder. She also has epilepsy and OCD, which are common co occurring conditions in autism. And I think I can speak for her, but she can jump in here too, that she discovered she was a Gestalt language processor through some of the work that I was sharing on Instagram. She's nodding yes. Um, I think obviously she always knew her language processing style, but did not know what it was called. So, welcome, Tiffany, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, and then we can launch into some questions.
Okay, I will be using a combination of mouth and AAC. Um, Talking about the Gestalt language processing, I have in many older posts, if you go back to like 2018, I'm talking about the way I learn and the way I basically write and talk and um, all these different things I had like made up different words and stuff for. This actually is just Gestalt language processing.
Yeah, and if you haven't checked out Tiffany's Instagram, it's definitely worth looking at. And she talks about language quite a bit on there. Recently, she did a five-part series about AAC. Tiffany, can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I started doing this because I have sat in on many IEPs, not just for my kids, but like other people as well. And I started to notice these different patterns from SLPs, especially when it comes to AAC. And I also work with non-speaking, generally, I would say age 10 or over, um, people, teaching them how to communicate via letterboard or AAC. And a lot of them have told me stories about why they refuse to use high tech AACs. And it tied directly to like kind of like the bad practices I've been seeing in these IEPs. And so I did a series talking about, I didn't know it was going to start to be a series. I just started talking about it. But talking about all these different things that I have seen and heard from users. So I can see the direct line between the bad practices and um, what some of my students and friends have called traumatized by AAC. So I was looking for any kind of information on AAC trauma and I could not find it. So I just started talking about what causes it based on what I see.
Have you heard anything surprising from your audience since you did that five-part series, or are you kind of hearing things you already knew?
Yeah, it's all stuff I know. I actually have like I could do like 20 more of those.
You should.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do some more because I have been seeing stuff, seeing more stuff, and seeing more traumatized people.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is really important, and that really brings us kind of into our question series here. I read a little bit about you in your bio, but can you give us a little bit more about your background in schooling and how you came into disability advocacy work? And for those of you that joined us late, Tiffany also uses AAC, so there may be a little lag as she's typing things out.
I attended elementary and middle school in Colorado, where I was born. I attended high school in Virginia. After high school, I went directly to college out of state and wasn't able to keep up the demands. I left right after freshman year and eventually went back and got my bachelor's after having my kids. My work experience has been very spotty. Between frequent seizures, anxiety, social demands, and executive functioning problems, employment has been difficult to keep. I came into advocacy shortly after my second time being identified with ASD, and right as I was being told my oldest also had very similar ASD traits. Also, one of my best friends at the time was a non-speaking autistic person who I already knew and communicated with daily from other walks of life. He really taught me how to advocate for all autistic people and not feel shame about the diagnosis. I wanted to explore this side of myself and my life. I had no idea it would lead to advocacy.
I'm so glad that it did, though. We're all really glad that you're in this space and sharing this kind of work. Tell us a little bit about your children and the journey from the autism diagnosis to now.
So it was the second time. So both times that I got diagnosed, I didn't know I was being evaluated for it.
Mm,
Um, so it was just like an overall evaluation. And so they ask you about your family and your kids and stuff. And I started explaining to my son, and then I started explaining about my oldest. And the person, the evaluator said, well, maybe you should get him checked for um, autism spectrum disorder. And this was literally the same day that they had brought it up to me, as in I was on the autism spectrum. And um, that was like kind of a mind-blowing moment, because I knew we were different. He had IEPs already. My brother is autistic, and my aunts, and I, they, the labels were different then. It was like mental, the R word. The,
right.
but I knew we had some differences in the family. I just didn't know they were all autism. And so when I got my sons, like when that realization came into play, um, I basically changed how I felt about being different, about disabilities and stuff, because I knew I kind of had to. Uh, I had to look at my kids in a different way. Not my daughter yet. I had not known yet about her. That happened like 2 years later. But both of my kids already had IEPs, and um, by the time my daughter was diagnosed, I was actually already kind of like advocating a little bit, because me and my son had been diagnosed earlier. I had been diagnosed before my son because of the Asperger's. I just didn't know they were the same thing then.
Okay.
And um, so I guess I come from a different view, because I I started I started this journey with myself before I had kids, and then even when I had kids that I knew were autistic, I always knew I was autistic first. So I think a little bit of difference in me advocating is that I tend to think, okay, well, how would I feel as a person, as an autistic person, versus how would I feel as a parent of an autistic person?
Mm-hmm.
I always go back to um, how would I feel if they were saying this about me, like because it's my disability as well. So I have a little bit of different um, view from the parent perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I bet that's incredibly helpful in your advocacy work, just to have actually both of those perspectives. Just for my clarification and maybe the audience, do you have 2 or 3 children?
I have 3 children.
Okay.
The oldest two, um, son and daughter, are autistic. Well, they're diagnosed autistic. My youngest, and they all have ADHD. Well, my youngest just has ADHD, but maybe we're looking at doing an autism evaluation as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I at least have the 3 neurodivergent children.
Okay. And um, I know the audience would be really curious to hear what your experience with them was like post the autism diagnosis. Maybe you can tell us their ages and then kind of what journey you went on. I know a lot of parents are given a packet from Autism Speaks or mailed information from the neuropsychologist. So I'm always curious what people's experience is and then what kind of therapies they end up pursuing and where their kids are at today.
I'm going to use AAC. This might be a little bit of a repeat.
Okay.
I was definitely not told about how it affected me when I first got it. I was told that when I was getting the first evaluation done, that I had Asperger's, but it was explained to that I was socially awkward and smart. I didn't really try to figure out more because my depression was so bad, so it didn't really matter then. But also, I knew that about myself forever, so I also didn't need to get any information about it. The second time I was told I was on the autism spectrum. That was not a good feeling because when I looked up what it meant, I saw all of the things I wanted to change about myself one day and realized it meant that I would be like this forever and I couldn't change. That caused a renewed sense of depression and shame for a long time afterward. I think that could have been avoided if it had been explained to me the first time in a better way. I could have already started advocacy by then. I got it from a different perspective when told about my son, and then later my daughter. I didn't want to be embarrassed of who I was anymore and make a different way for my kids coming up with this diagnosis. I want doctors, therapists, and anyone who has first contact with the parents who are just being diagnosed to tell them everything will be just fine. Tell them to not rush looking for therapies and never try to fix their kids, especially in the beginning. Or, what would you recommend parents do?
Sorry.
That's okay. Um, so I don't know if you can add to that a little bit for us. Does that mean you didn't pursue therapies for your kids? And maybe tell us a little bit about what their journey was like.
So they were already in therapies in school for IEPs, but at the ages of, I want to say 7 and 9. No. I think it was about 7 and 9 for them. That's when I I had more information about myself and therefore had started to have more information about them. I was in therapy. That's how I got evaluated. Um, I was already in therapy, but the kids were just doing the stuff that they had them do at school, and we did do some like outside in-house therapy after the diagnosis, but that didn't last long. So no, I didn't really get any therapies for them. What they get in school still is what they are still getting. They're still getting like a lot of different pullouts and things.
How old are they right now?
17 and 14.
Okay. Um, so I think you have this on your AAC as well, but I would like you to kind of tell us what you recommend that parents first do after an autism diagnosis.
What I usually see parents do is become sad and afraid. What I think they are really feeling is overwhelm. Most don't know a thing about autism or developmental disabilities. I could say a lot about how society forces parents to have these immediate negative feelings by doing the disservice of not teaching disability and disability history, but that could take a long time. I will say parents should stop everything and enjoy, all capital letters. Enjoy their child. Not only are the things they do cute and funny like their stims and little interests, but this time goes by so fast. And I hear many parents say they look back and were in too much a state of sadness and overwhelm to really enjoy that time. Also, all kids deserve to be parented by people who aren't always afraid and scared and sad. We deserve to be enjoyed just like non-disabled kids.
I love that. I love encouraging enjoyment. I think that's really, really hard though, right now in our society and the things that are being pushed through both medical practitioners and schools. Um, One of those things is ABA, and this is part three of what I called a three-part series on ABA perspectives. And I wanted to bring on guests that had a little bit of a different perspective. I'm just going to give a quick background to anyone in the audience that might be watching this later on YouTube. But um, right now, there is something going on called the neurodiversity movement, and a lot of people in the autism world are trying to encourage parents and therapists and medical practitioners to listen to autistic adults and listen to autistic voices. Um, that being said, I think a lot of what's being encouraged is to not keep pushing compliance based therapies and programs like ABA. However, I have had a couple different guests on that have had different perspectives on ABA, and you can catch those on my May in June on YouTube. So I'm curious, Tiffany, if you would share your thoughts on ABA and what you would like to tell parents that are listening.
This is a tough one because I realize that society has made any alternatives pretty hard to do unless you have money for them. I don't mind telling people that focused ABA can be a good thing to do if you need something covered by insurance. Focused ABA is for specific issues like potty training, safety issues, etc. Stuff that is necessary for life and safety.
So, for instance, there's comprehensive ABA, which is like the 40 hours a week kind of deal. And then there's like focused, where you do it like you do the ABA for specific issues like wandering, eloping, um, uh, potty training, um, some PICA issues that are life threatening, things like that. I I would never tell a parent not to do ABA, because those are not only like life and death issues, but like, um, they can make the whole household system like fail. So I always say, like, if you have to do it, because I know how our kids are kicked out of daycares or not even allowed in because of disabilities, even though that's against the ADA. There's a lot of I guess you could say, um, okay, so when there are life or death issues or family unit issues, or the parents are just stressed to the max, do ABA. If your kids are kicked out of daycares or not let in, then you should do it. And I've had parents who were basically crying to me because they really didn't want to do ABA, but they had like a situation where like they had another spouse, or the state was going to take them from them if they didn't do it, and they still didn't want to do it. And I'm like, no, 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 you should just do it. Like, your child is in more protection with you than away from you. So I don't feel like ABA is the worst for everybody. And that is because there are therapists who know about the neurodiversity affirming framework. There are whole centers, and then there are some that are just like, they're just good. They just care about the kids, and the parents a lot of times don't have any choices. So I don't feel like how other autistic people feel about ABA, simply because I've been through this whole parenting thing of parenting disabled kids. And even before they had diagnosis, they had other diagnoses. So I know how hard it is to not be stressed or overwhelmed, not try to just keep making it through the next day. So if you have to do it, don't judge yourself, but I will say, when I tell people who have to do ABA to do it, I tell them what not to allow. You know, I don't like the I think it's called discrete trial training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's an unfair way of progressing through life, especially for autism, which is like maybe like a dynamic disability where it changes from day to day. So when you're doing these trials, you could be basing those off of bad days. You could be basing them off of motor skills that don't exist. And a lot of ABA, or just people in general, don't understand that autism is a physical disability. So when you have motor control issues and you have sensory issues and you cannot explain that, most autistic kids cannot explain, what's going on inside them. Because even when I was little, I thought everybody else was feeling the same. I didn't know that other people were experiencing things differently until I was older. So you just have no way of communicating that you understand something when you're younger, or that you just cannot focus on a specific task, or you just can't do this, you can't do that. and discrete trial training. It's like they take trials, like little miniature tests, right?
Yep.
And then they base your progress or what you're going to work on from those tests. But most of the time, those tests are based on people who have good motor skills and who can actually physically do the work they want. Um, when you're constantly doing work that you know that you're constantly told to do different things that you know how to do, but you can't get your body to do, that is very demoralizing, and it causes a lot of aggression. So a lot of aggression comes from not being understood in therapies, not working on things that they can actually work on. So yeah, I always tell people, like, make sure your ABA therapist totally understands about the motor disinhibition, motor initiation, and motor planning inherent in autism, because that therapy will end up becoming not a therapy. It will become something that is um, dreaded.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But a lot of things like the repetitive skills. So in autism, you got to be careful because you can cause motor loops, like doing the repetitive things. But also, some bodies need the repetitive work. So ABA it does the repetitive work a little bit, so you can build muscle memory and stuff. But uh, there are motor loops that you can do when you start doing repetitive work too. So ABA therapists really need to have a good understanding of motor issues in autistic people. Most don't. So I always tell parents to make sure, if you have an ABA therapist, or RBT or BT, I think they use,
Mm-hmm.
teach that RBT or BT. They're very fresh and they don't know much a lot of the times. Try to get like a new person and just um, tell them what to work on. Tell them, keep going if they cannot show that they know something or they cannot get something right. Do not do not overwork the child on the same thing over time.
Mm-hmm. And I'll add in there about language too. So, when it comes to Gestalt language processing, not only do we know that a lot of speech pathologists are unaware that this is a type of language development, but I would say the majority of ABA therapists are largely unaware and approach everything through verbal behavior, which looks at a child like they are developing language in an analytic language fashion. And so, like I say all the time, we just need to keep educating everyone, because it's not a one size fits all. So, if you put your child in a certain type of program and you just assume, oh, they know about autism, that doesn't necessarily mean they know about motor or they know about language, and the child could be put into a type of programming that's not right for them. um, so I always, preach about individualizing things. And just a very quick aside, because I did not bring this up earlier, the reason why I talk a lot about autism and why I have on autistic guests is newer research is showing that um, most, if not all, autistic individuals are Gestalt language processors. Now, that being said, they do not all need language support. A lot of people work through the language developmental stages on their own, but a lot do need support, which is kind of what I teach people about. And I think any speech language pathologist or anyone in the related fields needs to understand this if they're working with autistic individuals. It's just an aside for people that might be tuning in or watching this later. The other thing people really need to understand is AAC. So I think I kind of want to end our interview in the last 10 minutes, and then maybe we'll take some questions, kind of talking about AAC. So, Tiffany, tell us why you feel everyone should have access to AAC and your AAC experiences.
Speech, at least from what I have seen in autistic people, is inconsistent. That's definitely true for me. And for many of us, it isn't autism that causes it, but one of our many co-occurring conditions. For me, it's epilepsy. Before or after seizures, I either cannot speak or cannot say exactly what I want because the words just don't trickle down to my mouth. I liken my speech to a factory. My stream of thoughts are on a conveyor belt, which is headed for my mouth. So many times, I go to say my thoughts, and there is nothing available on the conveyor belt for my mouth to say, like my factory workers took a break. Other times, I have the words available, but my mouth forgets how to say the particular word, or says a word that's not even there, or that I was not thinking at all. Sometimes, it's the medicines we take that cause word-finding issues. Sometimes it's anxiety, which causes situational mutism. Also, the reason can change daily or over time. Whatever it is at the moment, because it is not always reliable, there need to be other ways to communicate. The parent and professional communities seem to mostly focus on total speech regression in early childhood. However, many people lose speech altogether in early teens or early adulthood as well, especially if they have epilepsy or eventually get it. So, it makes sense to always have a well-practiced form of communication, or even a few, actually. But also, we need sensory-safe ways to communicate. Sometimes sensing emotions is also overwhelming. So in cases where a speaking autistic person may find themselves in a situation that's sad, exciting, angering, extremely joyful, etc., strong emotions, like any overwhelming sense interferes with my factory's ability, like maybe inclement weather might cause interruptions in a real factory. Being able to use other ways to communicate might still be available. Texting in a different room is another safe way to communicate without being overwhelmed by others' emotions or feelings. Pictures might be more accessible in cases where words are failing. Giving someone a way to draw a picture might also be helpful. Sign languages are great too, and always available like the mouth, because they are a part of the body. However, due to motor skills issues, they may have to be modified. There are unlimited ways to communicate, and there's no reason that speech has to be considered the best way. People say, I don't want that device to be a crutch. That makes no sense because crutches are helpful, they help people be mobile. Other forms of communication are not holding someone back, they are helping them participate in life, much like crutches do. Also, why is it a bad thing that someone may prefer a different form of communication? What if the student feels more comfortable and able to communicate more with a device even if they speak? Why is that such a horrible thing? Maybe that person has found what I did, that I deserve to still have a voice even when it's not working. That I don't have to exhaust myself day in and day out trying to overcome all the sensory issues that mess with my speech. Or that my silent seizures, that for a long time I wasn't even aware of, were causing me trouble communicating. That doesn't have to mean that my words are not important simply because I cannot say them. That I still have a right to be heard, and it's not some moral failure or character flaw to have trouble communicating by speech just because I can do it sometimes. It actually took me feeling so bad and feeling like a failure so long that I opened my eyes to what was actually right in front of me. I have non-speaking friends that use AAC speech generation devices as their only form of full communication. I had known about AAC and letterboard for years. I just never put two and two together that people with fluctuating speech could use anything other than speech. I knew about sign languages and picture cards. And I knew about suffering until my speech worked again. I never thought about using non-speech ways until a podcaster years ago had asked me to be on her podcast, and I said, well, whenever I'm in town, sure. She told me we could do it by phone, and I instantly said no. I didn't use the phone. I didn't answer nor make calls. Didn't matter whether it was for my kids' schools or home repairs. Everyone that didn't email or text me never got a response. Honestly, it was ruining my life and many relationships. It put my housing at risk more than a few times. But all of the sensory issues I mentioned earlier that affect my speech all hit me together on the phone. But in that moment of telling her no, I felt bad. Bad enough, it made me look for non-speech options to use for that particular podcast. From using it for that reason, I thought, why not all phone calls? I can finally make and receive phone calls. Or in person. Now, I don't feel like I have to stay away from people, ever afraid they will talk to me when I am not ready and I will say something insulting or weird. Many times, just having AAC handy makes me comfortable enough that my mouth words work more than they did before. And even the thought of writing something on AAC helps the factory keep words coming in time.
My gosh, I couldn't love that more. And you have a lot of positive messages in the chat about that. You just really said things in a perfect way. I'm glad this is recorded. um, kind of want to bring this up though. I think, in my mind at least, one of the big reasons why people, parents, and others reject AAC or don't want their child to have it, I think it's because it makes them look even more different. Um, and there's this whole thing about trying to get them to not look so different. Um, and if they can communicate better or differently with mouth words, then maybe they're going to blend in more. Do you see this as kind of the biggest issue? What do you feel is the biggest issue holding people back from giving kids AAC?
I do feel that's an issue, but one thing that people may not understand um, is when you have speech difficulties, you're standing out still. Like if people can't understand all your words, or they're like sometimes I will like blank out for a long time. Like people are not patient. Like that's still is an everyday daily thing that you have to deal with. Um, and if like some of my friends or family, when they're going to speak to people and they can't understand them, it's frustrating for everybody. It still makes people think that they always say non-speaking doesn't equal non-thinking, but people with speech differences, people still think that they are not as cognitively intelligent, even with a speech difference, even though they can speak technically and their family can understand them, they're still seen as very different. So AAC would just be like, okay, well, I'm different, but also now people can understand me. So there's really a net positive with the AAC, whereas sure I can speak, but people are still gonna make fun of me for my speech. You know, I might as well be understood and not made fun of for the speech. I'll just have a device. And everybody has devices anyway, so it's not really that different nowadays.
Yeah, I think things have definitely shifted since my early career. I've been doing this for 19 years. One of the first AAC devices, I guess you could say, that I used with a little boy was a green plastic Go Talk that had about 6 buttons that we would print out pictures from a board maker and he would carry that around. Obviously, things are much better now. Everyone's carrying around an iPad. So that, I think that definitely helps. Let's see, some comments came in here. I want to make sure that you see them before we log off. Someone said, I would love to hear more about Tiffany's experience growing up as a GLP. What helped, what hindered, and what made you feel heard and understood? Can you speak to that, Tiffany?
Yes. So um, I was a hyperlexic Gestalt language processor. So I really learned to speak by text. And I would have been able to, I was mostly echolalia for years, but I would have been, and scripting, but I would have been able to say my own spontaneous thoughts had I known that the things that you need to write, like this, the letters and the words, you can put together yourself. So if I had had somebody to teach me to spell and make words and stuff, I would have been able to speak a lot earlier. A lot of this stuff I wanted to say was locked up behind scripts, I would say. Mm-hmm. And I think my way of getting out was learning to write. I already knew how to read, but writing and making my own words and sentences kind of brought my own thoughts out eventually. What would have hurt is, for me, pictures, because I was and I still am very text oriented. So like if I had like the picture cards or AAC with just icons and symbols, that I would have had to translate that into text, because I don't think in pictures. I do think visually, but in text, not in images. So I think people should be mindful that there's a lot of things that we're visual thinkers, that sometimes that could mean by text. And if we did everything, like if we taught kids to spell while they were playing, if we taught them to those like little magnetic letters on the refrigerator, or like the letters that they might have, if you start spelling words with those, I think I would have understood that I can make those words to communicate. Also, these scripts that I had at the time, I think if somebody would have changed them around in text for me, if I had like AAC, I would have been able to get past the echolalia and scripting stage a lot sooner.
So moving on to stage 2, mitigating, so the mixing and matching, if someone had modeled that for you.
Yeah, and just any modeling of communicating with text or words would have been amazing as well. But I was stuck in that I could read, and I like to read, and all these thoughts were coming in, but I can only push out thoughts that I heard, sometimes read, but that was a little later in life. But the only things I could get out were things people had told me to practice to say, and some scripts I caught on to from TV shows and stuff. But yeah, what would have helped me is basically doing a lot of things in writing.
Thank you for sharing that. I actually did not know that you were hyperlexic, and now I want to have you back on just to talk about that. Because we get a lot of questions about how to best support hyperlexic Gestalt processors. And I do have another lunch and learn for everyone out there that's available with the course, specifically about hyperlexia and about supporting through text. But I think you made a really important point that this is not everyone. So we keep making these blanket statements like all autistic people are visual. But okay, some are hyperlexic and the text helps more than the pictures. Some might be more visual and the pictures might help. And I talk a little bit about this in the course too. The picture thing can get tricky because my visual representation of something might not be a Gestalt language processor's visual representation. And Marge Blanc has a great illustration in her book about this. Someone saying ball, and the person is thinking about a ball that you throw, and the boy is thinking about a ballpark. So that's his visual representation of ball. So that can also get tricky. So I think just really getting to know the person and trying to figure out how to individualize something for them.
Yeah, for like, so I have students, I have non-speaking students now, and when I'm first working with a student, I I'm still teaching, but I'm also like testing. So I might talk behind them or talk in front of them to see how auditory they are, or I might like if they're struggling pushing the AAC button, I might like touch their shoulder or something to see if they're what do you call it, kinesthetic person. Like everybody's different. Like you have um, and this is the way I look at like AAC, like which AAC device is right. Like you might have somebody who is a visual, sorry,
That's
who
okay.
is a visual learner. Um, so you might do more stuff with them with their eyes, but somebody uh, who might like to hear different things, you might have to speak to them more and speak the different letters. And then there's somebody who might need to have like a physical tap or something. And I do the whole thing so I know where they stand, but also you want to catch all those senses in almost every lesson so they can at least pick up one thing and learn. But also if they're hyperlexic or dyslexic or in between, you got to know where they stand on that too. So it's like everybody's different. Everybody has
Mm-hmm.
different sensory needs and the way they learn, and different, like, I don't want to say lexic needs in the way they
Yeah.
learn, but yeah, some people learn by, like my daughter, she's dyslexic, but if you sing anything to her, she'll remember it. You can teach her anything through song, but it has to be through song. Everybody just got to find out, like in the beginning, test people, but in a good way.
Yeah, a lot of our Gestalt processors are musical. They like to pick up on, or I don't know if they like it, but that's how they are. They pick up on the intonation, obviously, before the words. And so I think teaching with music is really beneficial. I'm going to have a music therapist on at one point and really talk about the music piece because it's so important. But thank you so much for coming on today, Tiffany. I know we all got a lot out of this. And like I said, I might have to have you on next year to talk more about the hyperlexia piece. But just thank you very much. And everyone, this will be available on YouTube this weekend if you'd like to rewatch or share the link with other people that were unable to join us. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.